Hey, in today's video, I'm going to be building a 3D printed prop from one of my more recent favorite 3D printed props from a Netflix original series that just came out last year. And they're about to come out with the season 2. So I'm really excited to show you how I put this one together. Real quick, if you guys like 3D prop builds like I do, definitely do follow this playlist right up here for other prop builds that I've made on this channel. And also don't forget to like and subscribe and push the little bell button down there so you have notifications when I put together new videos. I'm hoping that with this, I can show you guys a couple of tips and a couple of tricks on when you're building a 3D prop, maybe a few weathering tips in there as well. This print is also mainly PLA, so it's mainly plastic. I did use a resin printer for a couple of the smaller bits of the nose portion of the mask. So those are printed in resin, but most of it's still PLA and plastic. So I'm gonna take it from this to this. I think it looks pretty good. Pretty happy with it. All right, so let's go back and I'll show you how I put this one together. All right, well, I forgot to mention in the intro, but for this video, I'm going to be building the Sandman helmet from the Netflix series, The Sandman. This is going to be Morpheus's helmet. In this part right here, what I'm doing in the beginning is I'm assembling all the pieces of the helmet together with a 1/8 dowel. Each of the parts of the helmet have a small hole in it that allows me to insert a small dowel in it, glue it in, and glue it all together. All right, so I got the whole thing glued together. This is huge. Woohoo, yes! The head fits inside. This is good. This is very good. Very nice, very nice. All right, before I do the Bondo, I'm gonna fill in the holes and some seam issues that I had. I had some parts of the print that did not meet up well with the seams, so I'm just filling that in with some epoxy, some mixable putty epoxy to make sure those are connected well and the holes are filled. Okay, this is the Bondo part. This is where I'm gonna try to put as much Bondo on this as possible to fill in all those layer lines and finish filling in the seams from each piece of the print. Now, this portion right here where the red is, where you can see that little seam within the print, that actually fell off. It broke off after the print was finished, and I had to glue it back on. This caused for the print to actually raise up away from the other pieces, so I had to give it a little bit more attention with the sanding process to get that to a flat surface along with the other pieces also. Now I've basically given a full layer of fillable primer. It's a sandable primer that I like using, and I'm going to continue with the Bondo and kind of get back into those seam lines and get those layer lines taken care of. It's mainly the seam lines that I'm worried about with this. The layer lines are probably going to be dealt with a lot of the sanding and more painting on top of that. But at this point, I have now let it dry and I've sanded. I'm going to start sanding down or continue sanding down the Bondo to make sure I can get a nice smooth transition between the parts. I've given it a wet, thick coat of filler primer. You can still see that there's some seam issues going on. It's tricky because there's a lot of detail between the separations between the parts of the print. So I'm gonna keep on working at it though and keep putting more filler and more Bondo and more sanding and back and forth until I am happy with how it looks. All right, I've covered the majority of the mask just because usually you would want to sand it down to where it's like super fine, super smooth, all that good stuff. This mask though has an interesting aesthetic to it that it looks super aged, it looks old. So there's parts of this that I'm okay with not smoothing down completely. Or if I even like touch it while it's still wet, it'll give that kind of like peeling paint look, because it'll give me something to work with when I end up weathering it at the end, which might work for this in the long term. And then also on the front, there's a little bit of a seam down the middle here. This helmet's supposed to be something that was made by hand, and it's probably a fabric, so I'm gonna leave the seam in the middle. It's kind of nice. I kind of like it. These little spots within the ring here, very hard to sand little sections. I'm probably going to end up pooling it up with filler primer and letting that kind of saturate all those little layer lines and areas and crevices that I can't reach with the sanding paper, the sanding sponges, the sanding sticks, the mini files, all that stuff. I can't reach them. That's just too much. I'm just gonna let the filler primer do its job and fill that stuff in. Then I'm gonna end up painting it over. I'm gonna be weathering it. It should hide most of the crimes because I'm gonna just let this dry with the Bondo dry. Then I'm gonna sand it down again. I'm gonna give it a fresh coat of primer and we'll see where we're at that point. Hopefully it looks okay. See if I can get this kind of texture that this mask needs. To get the texture that I'm looking for, I'm gonna give it a coat of Plasti Dip real quick. So I'm gonna let this dry for a little while. I'm gonna let that just kind of cure and figure itself out. And I'm gonna come back tomorrow, give it a little bit more texture. I found a couple of different techniques on how to do some different textures on here, so I'm gonna try that out. It's gonna be fun. Okay, the next thing we're gonna do, I've done a little bit of research on this, and I think what I'm gonna do next. Okay, I definitely taped over what I was gonna use to explain this technique. But basically all it is, it's a really easy technique to get a corroded metal or a peeling paint sort of look to your 3D printed prop. It's really easy. All you do is you add some super glue, some extra thick super glue to your surface, move it around a little bit, and then add some sawdust on top of that. You could use baking soda. I use sawdust because that's what I had on hand. And then you're gonna spray all that away, then seal it up with some black Plasti Dip. It really gives a really nice texture to this prop, and you can see right there on the side, that's what it kind of ends up looking like. It looks like a corroded metal. Once you get some weathering on there, it really picks up all that weathering when you get to that step. All right, this portion of the painting process is really just to add some background color to the prop, in the sense that like I dive too far with the paint or I sand too far down, or maybe like it just shines through, you just shows through to the end. That's really all this is for. For this I'm using a bright green, a antique gold, and a red oxide. It's like a beige color. I'm gonna use this for the bone section, so this back area right here. And then for the snout part as well. I'm gonna use this textured brown rattle can. Hopefully it says hammered, but it kind of gives it like a leathery looking texture on the prints. So I'm gonna try this out, see if this works. It's supposed to come out kind of a brown. The brown ended up looking really, really good, and I'm gonna follow that up with painting the silver band that goes around the helmet with a silver enamel. I'm not gonna airbrush this specifically because I would have to tape off everything, and it was just a little bit easier to simply just brush it on with a paintbrush, so I ended up doing that. Hopefully it's raining right now outside, like real heavy storm right now, but I wanted to give you a quick update. I painted all the silver parts already, and the next stage is going to be to weather. I'm going to put some lighter, whiter shades on the bone back here just to make that look more like an actual bone. Same thing with the front bone nose portion. I haven't started these yet, but these will have the same treatment as well. I hope the audio isn't ruined by the storm too much. We're under like a tornado warning or watch right now, so it's just a really big storm outside. I already did this side, but I'm not gonna show you yet. This one eye plate, the inner eye plate, I'm gonna change. This middle part, I'm gonna leave how it is, and this outer one is already silver. This inner eye plate, not the socket plate, but the one that's still brown, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make it, I wanna give it more of a copper or a brass look to it. I know in the show, it doesn't look like that, but based off of different like comic book variations in the show, I'm gonna make it kind of like a mix of both of those things. I'm going to add a copper or a brass leaf to it. Then I'm gonna go over it with a gold leafing paint. That's gonna allow me to get a little bit of that texture from the gold leaf or from the paper, the actual copper leaf. And then I'm gonna go over with a paint version of gold leaf. It's gonna give me a little bit of variation in the texture a little bit, and then also give me a little bit of variation with the color as well. You know, because it's all about the layers. I'm gonna do that and then cover it up, and I'll show you what both sides look like when I'm all done. Because right now you can't see it, but it's finished over on this side. It's nice, it looks good. I'm gonna make this one, hopefully make this one look exactly the same. All right, so I'm gonna reveal what this whole thing looks like with the two sides painted. Yeah. In the back, got the back on the bone. Got that good stuff in the back there. All right, we have made it to the weathering step. Now this is gonna take the prop from looking brand new and shiny and great looking to weathered and aged and dirty and a little nasty, maybe a little bit. This is going to include a bunch of different washes of just me going over with some really watered down acrylic paint like blacks, raw siennas, browns, and some mustard colors to hopefully create some rusty areas within some of those metal pieces and really like grime up those bony areas of the helmet. I think it really turned out really nice with all those textures that we made before with the super glue and the sawdust. I think that turned out really nice. Now this next step, I wanted to take it even further with the weathering process. I added a little bit of moss and algae. I added some spray glue, which actually dries kind of wet. So it kind of looked like water was still adhered to the helmet. So I just added a bunch of this all over the place to make it look like maybe it's been stuck in some water for about 100 years, because in the show, he doesn't have it for about 100 years time. This is the look I'm going for with the bone. I'm just trying to match this top part right up here that's connected to the helmet, and all these pieces are separate. So I'm just gonna make this match that. That's the idea. All right, so we're gonna skip to the end of the weathering process. I eventually was able to get a good combination between paints and weathering to get the bottom half of the bones to match the top portion of the bones. I think it turned out pretty good, and I'm liking how it ended up turning out. Right now, all I'm doing is I'm putting the medical tubing through all the parts so they all connect. They can be suspended from the helmet. It does move around a little bit. It isn't too rigid, but I wanted it to be able to move around just a little bit. If you were to wear it, it would react with your movement. I think it turned out pretty good. Alright, all that I have left is to do the eyes. That's it. That's all I got left to do. The whole nose is now fully adhered. So like this very end is just glued into the tube. I glued it to this one and then this one. The second one and the first one. And then it just runs all the way up to the nose inside. It has a connection right there with the tube. And it was a little bit long. So what I did is I just used some zip ties to bring it up a little bit and then make sure that it was nice and tight. And the glue's holding really, really well. So if anything, one day this will probably pop off and I'll have to re-put it on there. But if it does fall off, all of them will fall off, but those are easily remade, and the weathering's not too difficult on it, so it wouldn't be a catastrophe if it did fall apart and break. But so far, this is kind of a stopping point right now. I'm gonna try to get the eyes done on a different video, on a different project. I got a couple of masks I need to get some eyes done, so we're gonna do that later. I'm happy with this. This looks great, and it fits my head. I do need to get some padding still. Gotta raise it up a little bit more. If you like other 3D printed props like me and replica pieces, oh yeah. I'm gonna show you how I put together this right here actually. Maybe. If you haven't been here before, welcome. And if you are a continuing watcher, if you're a returning viewer, then hello.